Hey everyone. So what I have right here on the whiteboard is a graph at full employment, or sometimes what we call long-run equilibrium. Because when we're at this point here where all three of our curves are intersecting at the same point, we're producing at full employment, and my aggregate demand, my aggregate supply are kind of in equilibrium, or they're kind of balanced with my long-run curve. So long-run equilibrium. A common question that you sometimes see on the AP test is one where you start off in long-run equilibrium, then you have something that happens that causes you to go into disequilibrium, almost always an aggregate demand shift of some sort. And then you get a question that asks, what happens in the long run if we do nothing? Or the phrase that you most commonly hear is if no policy action is taken, which after, when we come back to econ, we'll learn about the different policy actions, fiscal policy, monetary policy, but what if we do nothing, right? What if we just leave the economy alone? So for these types of questions, you're gonna start off in long-run equilibrium. And then, like I said, you're gonna have an aggregate demand shifter that's either gonna increase aggregate demand or it's gonna decrease aggregate demand. So let's start off, right? One of our most important shifters is interest rates. So let's say that there is an increase in interest rates, all right? So if interest rates go up, that's gonna mean, like, for consumers, first of all, that's gonna mean things like buying a car, buying a house, paying for college, buying things with a credit card. All of those things have interest rates associated with them. And when interest rates go up, your payments get bigger. The payments go up, so it's harder for people to afford. So if interest rates go up, then consumers are not going to be buying as much stuff. And also businesses are not going to be less likely to expand, because now the cost of expanding has gone up when they borrow money. So the odds of them turning a profit have gone down. So when interest rates go up, we see aggregate demand decrease because of less consumer spending and less business investment. So again, I'm going to draw my arrow showing my decrease to the left. Put my new curve in there parallel to the previous one. Draw my new aggregate, write in my new label for aggregate demand. Label my new short run intersection. Labeled it PL1, Y1 to go with my new aggregate demand. So what's happening here? Well, in the short run, what we're going to see is, because there's less demand, because people are going to be buying fewer houses, buying fewer cars, less people going to college, people buying less consumer goods on credit cards, businesses doing, borrowing less money to expand. What we're going to be seeing here is, because of the lack of demand, right? People aren't buying as much stuff, and so prices are going to start to fall because of that lack of demand. And when prices start to fall, businesses are going to cut back on what they produce. And when businesses cut back on what they produce, we're going to see an increase in unemployment because they don't need as many workers. So in the short run, what we're going to see is my price level is going to fall, my output is going to fall, and my unemployment is going to go up. Now, what happens in the long run? The answer is the same for every single one of these questions. That in the long run, the only thing that changes is wages become flexible. That wages that in the short run are fixed because we have like contracts, or we have expectations of what a teacher will be paid, or what a carpenter should be paid, or what a plumber should be paid. In the short run, right, we have expectations of what those jobs, what the pay of those jobs are. But what's happening in this economy is, over time, the high unemployment rate means that carpenters are out of work, teachers are out of work, plumbers are out of work. And the longer they go out of work, the more they begin to adjust their expectations of those wages. So what's happening is, high unemployment rate means that we've got lots of carpenters out of work, so that you might normally think you get paid a certain amount per hour as a carpenter, but when you've been out of work for 6 weeks, you might suddenly begin to readjust that. Or if you've been out of work for 3 months, you might begin to adjust that. And what's going to happen is, the high unemployment rate is going to drive our wages down in the long run. So in the long run, wages change and they adjust to that unemployment rate. High unemployment means that there's competition for jobs, which means we're going to get lower wages. Wages are a resource price, right? And resources, the price of resources, that affects our short-run aggregate supply. So that if you're a business and you start seeing that workers are willing to take lower wages, now you get excited because you can hire more workers at those lower wages and you can produce more to make more profit. So what we see is an expansion of our short-run aggregate supply in response to the lower wages. Draw my arrow, put my new curve in there. I'm going to label it SRAS 2 because it was the second shift that happened. It was the responsive shift. This isn't a double shift like in microeconomics, right? This is a shift and then a response. So I have my response shift. I find my new equilibrium. I'm going to label that PL2 because it's from the second shift. And then my output right here, I'm just going to put Y, my full employment output, equals my second output after my second shift. And then down here, my second shift, what happened was, right, we went from this point right here to this point right here. Price level fell, output went back up, unemployment going back down with my second shift. And that's what happens in the long run when there's no policy action or when the government does nothing or when we allow the economy to fix itself. We're back at full employment at a new price level, right? So if you have a question like on an FRQ on the AP test that says you're starting off in full employment, then you get some sort of shift that happens, and then they ask what happens if no policy action is taken. It's going to be this. We're going to have aggregate demand shifting one way, and then short-run aggregate supply shifting the other way to close that gap. This is an example of a decrease in aggregate demand. An increase in aggregate demand would just do the opposite. It would have increased the price level. It would have increased the output. It would have decreased unemployment. We would have had an inflationary gap instead of a recessionary gap. In the long run, that inflationary gap is going to lead to low unemployment, which is going to drive up wages. When wages go up, short-run aggregate supply would shift to the left this time. When short-run aggregate supply shifts to the left, it would have closed that gap. So that's long-run equilibrium, short-run disequilibrium, back into long-run equilibrium with no policy action. All right, see you guys in the next video.